low in 2023. And sorry, if we could just go to the next slide as well, please. Sorry, just okay, there's more here. Sorry, just one slide further on. If I could just point also, honorable members, to although this was not an input to the committee, but in the last week there was a whole morning seminar by the Southern Center for Inequality Studies at WITS, and they analyzed also the whole, most of the budget, and there was a lengthy session on the health budget, and they pointed out quite significant reductions in the health budget, not so much in this year, but going forward to next year's budget, the 23-24 budget. So the health sector was allocated, there were very large cuts in the 21 budget, around 20 billion was put back as part of this 272 billion that honorable members have supported for the 22 budget so far. But it is completely true that there are still significant reductions in the 23 budget. So I just wanted to say that we recognize these points from COSATU and WITS University, that there are still significant budgets in the significant pressures in the 23 budgets, not the current 22 budget, but the 23 budget, and that we will need to keep an eye on these in the production of budget 23. I think, Chairperson, just because of time reasons, I think I've spoken quite long. I'm going to skip the responses to the one or two other issues which is on the previous slide and hand over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson and honourable members.
Good morning. Can go.
So I will take you through the issues that came through on learning and culture. So the first point in my slide is rather small words. I tried to squeeze everything onto a page. Maybe I should have left it as bigger, but anyway, here we go. So COSATU raised the issue of that the department must be held accountable for the expenditure, and that they begin to see the school backlogs grant lacking adequate sanitation, water, classrooms begins to be addressed and is eradicated over the MTF. So we agree with that, and that both the National Department of Basic Education and the provincial education departments must be held accountable for this expenditure and delivery, because there are two places. There's the indirect grant, which is the school's backlog grant, but there's also the education infrastructure grant, as well as provincial education department's own spending on infrastructure. Then COSATU raised the issue of the CCMA, and the 120 million will not be enough to help undo the damage of the previous reckless cuts to an overwhelmed CCMA that is struggling to cope with the flood of retrenchments. Just to point out, as I think I did in the previous hearing on the appropriation bill, that all budgets were reduced in support of the COVID response and as part of fiscal consolidation. So nobody was chosen or unchosen. It was an across-the-board thing. And we asked institutions to undertake cost containment measures so that they could maintain their service delivery. The CCMA currently receives a transfer of just over R1 billion in each year of the MTF. So here too, honourable members, the CCMA needs to undertake the cost containment measures. If you were to look at the latest annual report, you would see that they have in fact paid performance bonuses. And that would have been something, if I was the CCMA, where I would have looked first to find some money to keep towards service delivery. Then on to equal education, they raised, obviously, as their name suggests, mainly issues around basic education. They also raised one issue around higher education. So the first issue was that since 2012-13, at least 2.7 billion has been irregularly spent through the CD program. And we want to explain again, irregular spending means that procedures have not been followed. It doesn't always mean that the items were not delivered. So in this case, the irregular expenditure is related to supply chain management procedures not correctly followed by the implementing agents who were used to deliver the school infrastructure projects, but the delivery of the projects did take place as planned. Nonetheless, the Treasury agrees that the Department of Basic Education must strengthen controls to ensure that the prescribed processes are adhered to and that consequence management is consistently applied. The next thing Equal Education raised was that between 2011 and 2019, 30% of the ACD allocation was not even spent. We agree that spending performance has been poor in the past, but it has improved. And in fact, for the last financial year, which the committee will hear us presenting on at 2 p.m., 99% of the allocation was spent. Third thing, they are advocating for basic education to receive funding that grows in line with learner enrollment and inflation and is pro-poor and gender inclusive. We agree that that is what should happen to basic education funding, but that provinces must ensure that the priority areas are sufficiently funded. Fourth item, they call on the National Treasury to provide meaningful oversight of the sector. So just to explain, honourable members, the basic education sector has a number of its own oversights, which include the Council of Education Ministers. That will be the National Minister of Basic Education and the 9 provincial MECs of education. They sit right at the top. Underneath them is the heads of education committee members, which are the DGs, the DG of the national department and the 9 heads of department in the provinces. And that headcom has various subcommittees looking at personnel, infrastructure, etc. Then also in the provinces, there are the provincial treasuries who perform the same role over provincial departments as the National Treasury does over national departments. And then there's also the provincial legislatures. And all of those institutions provide the oversight. From the National Treasury's perspective, we provide monthly spending reports to the National Department. That's both on the appropriated spending, and then our IGR colleagues also do ones for the conditional grants. And we provide quarterly reports to both the SCOA and the SECOA on the National Department spending on conditional grants, respectively. And then we also have the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, who are responsible for the oversight of non-financial performance. So there is quite a large set of oversight that is being done. But also to just remind the committee, accounting officers have the responsibility to use the funding that's been allocated to them in the correct way. Fifthly, Equal Education is suggesting that the committee engage the National Treasury on the decision to reduce infrastructure funding over the medium term once inflation is taken into account. There were no reductions, but in the way that our fiscal framework works, we only increase by a certain percentage across the baseline, and then only the priorities will get additional funding. So there were no reductions to the education infrastructure grant in this budget, and it has an allocation of 45.5 billion and is growing by 4.2% over the MTF. So depending what inflation is, 4.2% may obviously in the current, if you take the current inflation rate, it is lower than inflation. So you could say that there was a reduction, but if inflation decreases, then it would be an above inflation increase. The EIG itself is allocated 38.8 billion and grows by 4.5% over the MTF. Sixthly, they asked the committee to ensure that provincial education departments have sufficient funding to meet the national minimum thresholds for per learner funding. We agree with that. Provinces must ensure that the priority areas are funded sufficiently. Then the last item on the last item from equal education is on higher education and training. Here they are asking that the National Treasury and the Department of Higher Education and Training develop a cohesive policy that ensures that all learners have access to higher education. The Department of Higher Education and Training is responsible for policy development in the area. However, the Minister of Higher Education and Innovation has established a ministerial task team to review the student funding model, and the results of that should be out once it has gone through Cabinet for approval. Then the FFC made a comment on higher education and training around the funding of new students in 2022-23, saying that that creates future funding obligations, and if revenue does not recover, the DED budget will be under severe pressure and could lead to the underfunding of priorities. We agree, but that is not only for this allocation, it would be for all allocations if the revenue does not perform. So it's not specific to that particular funding. That funding was given over the MTF. And similarly, they welcome the addition of the 24.6 billion to provinces to address teacher shortages. And it's the same point as the point above. So if you hire the teachers in 2022-23, a future funding obligation is created for province. Should the sector face slower or negative growth over the coming years, education department budgets will be under severe pressure. So that was also an MTF allocation, which took into account the carry-through costs of employing people in year 1 for year 2 and year 3. But similarly, if the revenue does not come through in the subsequent years of the MTF, it's not only for that allocation, it will be for all allocations made. Then the last two comments were comments made by the Department of Employment and Labour when they came for their hearing. And I just want to highlight two issues. They raised the issue of government procurement for goods and services from the supported employment enterprise is lacking due to the procurement rules. The department was advised some time back to develop a policy on government procurement from the supported employment enterprises, which they had to present to the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer at the National Treasury. And to date, that has not been done. So it's very difficult to see if you haven't done what you were requested to do, that you can then say that the procurement rules are the problem. And then lastly, Chairperson and honourable members, they indicated that the rollover of 45 million for the Child Labour Conference, which should have taken place in 2021-22, only took place in 2022-23, so that was in last month. And they indicated that the request for the rollover was not considered by the National Treasury. Chair and honourable members, we can give you the items that we take into consideration. There's a set of criteria. And in fact, this rollover did not this item did not qualify for the rollover, because one of the items that you have to provide us with is you have to show us that you placed the order or you have invoices that you received in 21-22 for the service, and that indicates that you then can get the money for the rollover. And they did not have that. So to say that it was not considered by the National Treasury is maybe not the correct way to have put it to the committee. Thanks.
Thank you, Team Treasury. Are we done with our presentation?
No, Chairperson, we still have two more speakers.
Okay, okay, Dr. Mampo. Who's
Thank
coming?
you very much, Honorable Chair.
Continue, Madam.
May I go through, Honorable Chairperson?
Yes, yes,
Oh,
please.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson and members of the SCORE Committee. Good morning. My question is, the first one is from Saika for Department of Public Enterprises. And the question is as follows. Will the additional funding 3.5 billion required for SAA also be funded from the contingency reserve? And our response as the National Treasury is that the 3.5 is not included in the fiscal framework. The request for funding for this purpose will have to follow the budget process. A decision has not been made. You may recall, Honorable Chairperson, that initially for SAA to the business rescue, they needed 14 billion. But in the budget, we allocated them 10, they initially needed as to make up 14 billion. Next slide. Next slide. Mampo, can you please? I'm not sure who's controlling the slide. Oh, thank you very much. And is for vote 29, Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. And the question is as follows. What kind of support is government offering to farmers, including commercial farmers, to deal with drought and disasters? As well as has any provision been made to assist struggling agricultural sector due to all those disrupting events such as drought and fire that had been detrimental to the sector? And our response as the National Treasury is that as government, we've been providing support to farmers through different support interventions such as conditional grants, YOCASP, Ilimalizema, Land Care, and other support measures such as the blended finance and agri-BEE. Over the 2022 MTF, about 8.4 billion has been allocated as support towards farmers to produce and producers in the agriculture sector. Regarding conditional grants, we have allocated 7 billion over the MTF for conditional grants, like I've mentioned. Blended finance and agri-BEE as a support program meant to increase transformation and to ensure growth and development in the sector. Therefore, over the medium term, we've allocated 150 million and 1.2 billion respectively for those two interventions, which are agri-BEE and blended finance. You may recall, Honorable Chairperson, that blended finance was introduced in 2017-19, and it was capitalized with, if I recall very well, 100 million. And 2018-19, it was 120. Then to date, it was 3.7 billion. But there were challenges in the land bank because the blended finance was administered through the land bank. So because of the operational and liquidity challenges of the land bank, the IDC is now brought into the space to help, facilitate this program so that it can be fast-tracked. And other support measures from the department is in a form of concessionary loans to emerging farmers through agri-BEE. As I said earlier, that it seeks to address transformation by supporting Black emerging farmers and agri-businesses. I'm not able to see the drought issues. I'm not able to see Mampo because it is cutting, but anyway, the drought issues are being managed through the National Disaster Management Center. Can you go to the next slide, please? The next question again is for vote 29, Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, but from COSATU. The question is the 2.7% cut over the MTF for land reform defies a desperate cry for land and undermines the government's professed commitments to accelerate land reform. So we are saying that there have never been any cuts, COSATU. Over the MTF, land reform and restitution, which the program of the RAT has been allocated 11.6 billion to acquire 136,87 hectares of productive land for land reform purposes, as well as to settle 1,200 land claims, accelerate land reform, and address social injustice and inequality. The National Treasury will continue to work with the department to ensure that land reform is accelerated. Can you go to the next slide, please? Next question is from FFC to the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. And the questions are as follows. How notable and significant the impact caused by the floods in KZN have on the overall South African economy? What measures can be implemented by government to ensure that it responds adequately to issues of climate change? Our response as the National Treasury is that currently we are finalizing a diagnostic assessment on disaster risk financing. Once approved, the diagnostic will provide recommendations on how to improve disaster management capability and outline financing instruments available for risk financing. Similarly, as the NT, we are advancing work on diagnostic assessment of its climate change related activities. It is expected that once concluded, the diagnostic will, among others, provide recommendations on how to strengthen existing areas of work and outline actions for further integration on climate change into the macro fiscal framework. Since 2021, as the National Treasury, we have been embarking on a process to develop a climate budget checking system. To this end, we have been conducting pilots to 11 sites across the 3 spheres of government, and we're expecting to finalize this process in June 2022. So the 11 sites will include your sectors such as the agriculture, energy, transport, and from the national department's point of view, will include the National Department of Agriculture, I think water, and transport. And from the provincial point of view is the Gauteng provincial government, looking at the Department of the Agriculture, Provincial Agriculture, and the Eastern Cape and Mpumalanga. But for the Mpumalanga is transport, the Eastern Cape is still agriculture. And from the local government point of view, the pilot sites are the city of Johannesburg, the city of Cape Town, Umhlatusi, and Steve Tshwete municipalities. Once approved, this climate change budget taking framework, once approved, the climate budget taking framework and relevant methodologies are expected to provide a systematic approach to planning, budget reporting, and facilitate increased accountability for climate change through a uniform gathering and monitoring of climate-relevant expenditure data across government. As a budget reform, the CBT will also help improve future spending on mitigation and adaptation measures and strengthen intergovernmental cooperation. The next question is also from FFC for Department of Environmental Affairs. I think it's a follow-up in terms of the response. The aim is to use a holistic approach to embed the climate-related reforms such as CBT into the existing public finance management systems and accountability. This will not only ensure synergies in planning and budgeting, but will also help government to ensure that climate interventions that are implemented across government are targeted and deliver value for money. For this to happen, it will require a stronger interdepartmental coordination, facilitation across central government departments, and a more strengthened interface with lead policy and sectoral departments. In addition, the NT City Support Program is working with metros to strengthen the integration of climate resilience into the design, preparation, packaging, and financing of capital infrastructure projects, as well as into systems that support the delivery of capital. Can you go to the next slide, please? The next question is for the Department of Small Business Development, and here is not necessarily a question per se, but is that we are more aligned to the presidency and the DPNE regarding the support towards the SMMEs, because at some point I remember the DPM and the presidency made a presentation to Parliament. So here we are concurring with them. And the question or the comment more so is that as part of government's disaster response and recovery approach, particularly the third phase, the second phase, stabilization and recovery, government will support small businesses, including township and village enterprises, informal traders affected by the floods. So as the National Treasury, we are saying that to activate our contribution to is phase 2 actually, stabilization and recovery of the disaster response. The Department of Small Business Development has reprioritized 50 million for the establishment of the flood relief program. The program is in the form of grant funding to affected small businesses and will be administered by CIFA, which is CIDA, which is an implementing agency of the department. The National Treasury has further approved a reprioritization of 10 million for implementation of the flood relief program, which is expected to support small businesses with the repair of property infrastructure, working capital request. And if I can also mention, the DTIC also is making a request to the National Treasury to also help SMMEs affected by the floods, including medium and larger businesses. The next question is towards the DTIC from COSATU. COSATU says it welcomes the allocation of 17 billion for the industrial financing. Those are the incentives over the MTF. Nonetheless, they remain concerned about the 4.8 cut in funding to DTIC over the MPF. And our response is that the DTIC is projected, the budget of the DTIC is projected to decrease at an average annual rate of 3.7 over the 2022 MTF. The department has received a once-off allocation of 1.3 billion during the 2021 financial year for the Economic Stabilization Support Program to support businesses that were affected by the July unrest in KZN and Gauteng, as you may recall. Further to that, through the Social Employment Fund, which is administered by the IDC, and is a project of the Presidential Employment Stimulus, or a program more so, 800 million was allocated in 2021-22, and that was phase 2 of the Presidential Employment Stimulus, and a further 861 million and 787 million for 2022, 23 and 23-24 respectively, which is phase 3 of the PES, have been allocated. So because now you're not talking about 2024-25, which is the outer year of the MTF, you are likely to see, the allocation or the baseline coming down. So it's not a matter of a cut, but it's a matter of the baseline coming down because there are no allocations for the PES towards the DTIC. Hence, you see that as a decline in the budget, but it's not necessarily a decline in the budget. It's not a cut. It's just that there are no further allocations in terms of the Presidential Employment Stimulus. I'm not sure, Mampo, if I'm done or is there any slide that is still remaining? Thank you very much, honorable members.
Okay, honorable members, good morning. Mampo, please could you just move on to the next one? So I'll be quick. COSATU has raised some issues in my cluster, specifically around state-owned companies, their turnaround plans, and in cases where they need to reprioritize, that is not reprioritize, to retrench, that is what they need to do. Honorable members, it's quite important for us to have sustainable entities who need to be fit for purpose, and if that means that some rationalization in their staff numbers is required for them to deliver services efficiently and effectively, we should support them and commit and empower them to do so. The inability of the post office to successfully implement its numerous turnaround plans always comes down to some labor matters, and as a result, we have seen the post office in the position that it finds itself in right now. Relation to the RABS bill, fully support the need for a motor vehicle accident compensation system that is affordable and sustainable and equitable, and we do believe that the RABS bill does that and supports that the Department of Transport retables this. Just in relation to mining licenses, we do have ring-fenced allocations in the DMRE budget for this year and next year. It's 128 million over the 2 years to upgrade the SAMRAD system to deal with mining license application backlogs and the entire system around associated with that. And then lastly, Chair, the comments and inputs from SAICA, who was asking questions about, is it reasonable to expect sectors to reprioritize budgets for disaster relief? And the disaster management framework in the Disaster Management Act does require this. And this is really around incentives to support a well-functioning disaster management system where you have weak mitigation and preparedness measures. The risks are always higher on the side of relief and reconstruction. And what we want to do through this process, which is encouraged in the Disaster Management Act, is to shift those incentives back that minimizes the damage around post-disaster recovery and relief if we had better preparedness and credible risk management plans. And based on that, the Disaster Management Act does say that the first port of call for funding for disaster relief is from own sources before national funding can be considered. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I think we are done. The other cross-cutting issues we can deal with if honorable members need us to go into further details. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, DM, Dr. Mampo and the team. Honorable Mahlangu, are you back? She was...
Yes, I'm back, Chair.
Okay, please continue.
Thank you. Thank you, Team Treasury, DM. I'll now request members if they want to engage with the presentation from Treasury to do so. I think the DM will talk last after the responses or the engagement. I see Honorable Detroit, Honorable Ryder. Honorable Okam. Who else is there? Darren and Dubabalo? Only 3 hands so far.
Honorable Dikhale, I'm trying to raise my hand.
Okay, Honorable Dikhale.
Oh.
Only 4 hands. Thank you.
I would like to speak, but my network is erratic.
Okay, let's try it. Maybe we should start with you, Honorable Peters. Was that Honorable Peters speaking?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, let's start with you before the network disappoints us. You can hit on Honorable Peters.
Mine is very short, Chairperson, and I am not going to be focusing on everything, but just to check with a National Treasury. I don't know what the name is. One of the Treasury gentlemen responding to, I think it was an issue with regard to the ACD issue, and indicating that, oh no, it's not the gentleman, it was the lady, indicating that the money was almost like the money was not lost with regard to the infrastructure in the schools, but the money was spent in an irregular way. But I just want to find out, because I would believe that National Treasury, as the ones holding the key to the safe, should be able to also help advise where it is essential or necessary that issues like, for example, Honorable, I think it's Honorable Okamp or Honorable Marais raised about the JTG region, which is supposed to build, in terms of statistics, about 6 schools per year, but only building 2. which means that the target to reach the number of schools to be built will be delayed. I would believe that National Treasury is more than any other department capacitated to be able to project. That is the word that I wanted to use, based on information from Estates SSA with regard to how much and how long it will take the Department of Basic Education to be able to address the backlogs, but also to be able to try and mitigate the increasing number of a learner population. I think it was around 2005 where the department took a decision to track the learner as opposed to just be throwing money. So I think it is important that we look at where is the learner population growing and where are those the schools needed. But also, Chairperson, there are times when the Department of Basic Education scrap, for a lack of a better word, when they build new schools. There are schools that were built long ago, but maybe here and there the ceilings have fallen and all those type of things, and some of them don't even have ceilings. And some of those schools could be converted into the accommodation that is necessary for times of disasters like now that it is happening. And am I still on, Chair?
Yes, loud and clear, madam.
Okay,
We can hear
Chair.
you.
So I was saying that, Chairperson, also National Treasury working together with provinces and COGTA, supporting COGTA with regard to the challenges. I know National Treasury, Mary Jane told us a couple of years ago that it is not, the people at local government are earning far more than some of the people at Treasury, and to be capacitating them, those people feel that they can't be listening to people who take less than them home. So I think also, but the reality is, if there are capacity challenges, the reflection is not only on the local government sphere or the provincial COGTAs and COGTA itself. It's on government as a whole. But who holds the keys to the safe, like I said earlier? It's National Treasury. Lastly, under the Department of Environmental Affairs, can I even Forestry and Environmental Affairs, that one, with the challenges of climate change. You would remember, Chairperson, that in 2009, the long-term mitigation scenario of the climate change policy of South Africa indicated that South Africa needs to be allowed to plateau around 2025 and then start declining. Is the department engaging with Treasury with regard to when that situation does ultimately happen? Because right now, we do have serious challenges of the impact of climate change. These floods and this inclement weather that you don't know whether it's summer or winter or whatever, it tells you that we have reached, I'm not a scientist and I'm not a climate change specialist nor an environment expert, but I think, or geologist. Chairperson, you would remember we went with the Department of Defense and the military to a sinkhole here at Tabatwan. And they were indicating to us that that thing erupted because of lack of maintenance over the years. And that thing is going to happen over many years in different parts of the country. In the Northern Cape, as we speak, from the area called Dunnyscape, which is predominantly a mining area, there is quite a lot of trucks traveling on the road on the R31. There is this, I'm sure many of you would have seen the damage that the water around Platfontein has created on the R31 near Kimberley. That type of development of water seeping, I don't know what creates it. It's growing all over that R31 right up to Dunnyscape. And it would mean that once the province is addressing the R31 near between Batley and Kimberley, the others are developing. So I think it's important in the responses, because some of these things that I'm raising, we raised in the hearings. I know that National Treasury is responding to the inputs by PBO, FFC, and the different role players. But we raised some of these things also, and we would need as a committee to get probably answers that would tell us how we can be able to deal with this. Because one day we'll wake up and half of our towns have been swallowed by sinkholes. Is that what we want? Right now, many of our towns doesn't have water. The infrastructure underneath is decayed and all those type of things. But thank you, Chairperson. I've raised the points that I wanted to raise, because I said I'm not going to focus on each and everything that they were responding to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
very
to
much.
National Treasury for the responses. They are very informative.
Thanks, Honorable Peters. Honorable Titoit.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, and thank you for National Treasury to National Treasury for the presentation. Honorable Chair, just a comment with regards to the support from Treasury and government initiatives towards farmers. It's notable and noted that the majority of this support is price-based, and I think that is something of great concern. But be that as it may, I want to know from National Treasury with regards to the disaster funding. We haven't been in a position to be in engagement with the Minister of Finance, and yes, the ad hoc committee on the disaster is waiting for that meeting to be scheduled. But I want to know, in spite of the 1 billion rand that was promised, that will obviously not be new money, as is whispered, and it's funds that will be shifted. And it's evident that more funds will be needed in these disaster-struck areas to the tune of about 25 billion rand. Does National Treasury have the capacity to avail funds to that amount? And then lastly, Chair, I know the SANDF didn't form part of this presentation, but with regards to the SANDF and them assisting also in these disaster-struck areas by means of expertise and manpower, does National Treasury know if any funds were availed to assist the SANDF with regards to procurement in this bridge building program? Because it seemed as if they only arrived with the manpower, but without additional resources to conduct the work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Titoit, for that input. Honorable Ryder.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and to the Joint Chair as well. Yeah, Treasury, thank you. First of all, yes, Deputy Minister, welcome. Thank you for attending. Your attendance is greatly appreciated, and I think that perhaps my first question is going to be directed at you directly. So obviously it hasn't formed part of the discussions that we've had over the last 2 days, mostly because we only had an announcement last night. But I think it's an opportune time, Deputy Minister, to ask about the impact of the extension of the waiver of fuel, the R1.50 in fuel tax levies. If you can just give us an indication about, obviously it took some time before the decision could be made. It was made at the 11th hour last night, but if you can just point us out, because you've obviously done your calculations, what impact that is going to have on the budget that's been put forward, because yeah, there was a comment that there is going to have to be some sort of an adjustment as a result of that. Perhaps you could just give us an inkling of how deep the impact is going to be, and what's going to be done to mitigate that impact, Deputy Minister. But yeah, again, thank you for attending. It really is greatly appreciated. To Treasury, I think, yeah, I'm not going to interrogate the responses. I think the responses are there. They're not all replies. Some of them are just responses, and some fairly defensive comments that have come out today. But what was notable in today's responses is that the responses were directly to the presentations and not really to the deliberations of members. And I'm not sure how other members feel, but I don't feel that my inputs into the meeting have been adequately addressed by the response from Treasury, which talks, directly to the inputs from civil society and not to the deliberations of the members. So I'm not going to take it any further, Chair. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Detroit. Honorable Ryder. I'll now hand over to Honorable Ocamp.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson and Co-Chairperson. I appreciate the opportunity. Honorable Chairperson, yeah, firstly, also thank you to the Deputy Minister for being here. I agree with the Honorable Ryder that the responses from Treasury basically focuses on what was given in the public submissions and not on the deliberations that we had with them yesterday. There were quite a few issues that we as members brought up yesterday that has not been responded to today. And I would like to, in a certain sense, just summarize some of our concerns. The whole issue surrounding the fuel price and the increases, apart from the fact that it was done on the last minute yesterday evening, which is absolutely ridiculous, but to just go on further on that. We have said yesterday that we need the fuel levy that government is charging to go down or to be scrapped. There are ways in which it can be done, and we also mentioned the ways in which it can be done, and I'm going to mention them again now. For starters, we said that the moment that we can get to a point where wasteful expenditure are scrapped, where you don't have wasteful expenditure, which is actually what we should strive for. I know it's not something that would be possible under this government all the time, but we must do that. Look at the answer that we received on page 17 with regards to VIP protection, where we brought up yesterday that VIP protection gets a certain amount, which is not a lot less than what the NPA gets to really prosecute all these Zondo Commission allegations and stuff that came out of there. The answer that we get today is basically that was put in front of cabinet and cabinet approved of that. So what do we have here? We've got complaints about a VIP sector, especially for our cabinet, who is bloated, then approved by cabinet. So they approve the stuff for themselves, and then we think that we must just leave it at that. It is absolutely ridiculous to just accept from us to accept the fact that, okay, it has been put in front of cabinet, but they decided on their own protection, and this is not what it is about. Let's get further to the fuel levy and the impact that will have. The impact on the cost, not only of transport for people to get to and from work and home, the cost of food, the cost of clothing, the cost of everything for every South African, whether they are rich or poor, and especially the poor that will be affected by this. Those costs are going to climb through the roofs due to the war in Ukraine at the moment, and due to the fact that this government is not really serious when it comes to looking at ways in which we can lower that fuel levy. Now, another way, and I said it yesterday, in which we can lower the fuel levy is to give a tax rebate via SARS to people that have already got third-party insurance. You don't have to have the road accident fund carry those burdens, because there are people that has got third-party insurance already. Give a tax rebate for those people so that they don't have to pay that via fuel taxes again. The other way is to open up the market for fuel. Why must every single market in South Africa, whether it's food or clothing or cattle or whatever you do in this country, there's competition with regards to that. Why not in the fuel market as well? The moment that we will open up this fuel market, there will be competition, and people, the prices will come down to the benefit of everybody. Why am I going on about these fuel prices? Because this will have, in the end, a direct effect on a lot of other things. We spoke about Sasria and what happened during the July riots. Can you imagine what will happen in this country if people really go hunger all over the spectrum? If there are no food, if they can't afford going to their work, they can't afford to visit their families because of this fuel price that really had a knock-on effect on all the stuff. The possibility for riots is going to be high. The possibility for Sasria doing more claims and payouts in the future will increase. So we really need to get to this, and we heard nothing really from Treasury with regards to that today. Sorry, Honorable Chairperson. Chairperson, when it comes to disasters, yeah, we always get the answer that disasters must be declared for that money to be able to be claimed. And we agree with that. Again, it brings us to the question, why are government and provincial governments so reluctant to declare disasters when they occur? I can take again the Northern Cape as an example. 7 years we had droughts. The drought was declared a disaster area, but basically for human consumption and for drilling of boreholes. There was not a lot done to assist farmers, big and small, with regards to grazing and to assist them to handle the knock-on effects of this drought. We think that all of a sudden when it rained, the drought is over. That is not the case. The grazing has been depleted in such a way that it will take years for that grazing to be recovered. So we need to ask the question, why are governments reluctant? Are they thinking it would be a bad reflection on them if a disaster with regards to that is declared? Because it really, I mean, take the locust in the Northern Cape. We had veld fires in the Northern Cape, and none of those were declared disasters, although it's disasters that needed immediate help. So I would urge the various governments, and I would urge National Treasury also to have discussions with the various governments and to explain to them what the procedures are that needs to be followed when funding for disasters are required. Honorable Chairperson, there has not been anything said today about the questions regarding the payments of invoices within 30 days yesterday. I would like to get National Treasury's feedback on that. I think it's totally unacceptable that suppliers out there who wants to make a living must wait months on end for government to pay their salaries or the invoices. And then there's also a question yesterday with regards to the ring fencing of funds. People stay in a municipality, let's take Gamagara, where I come from, for an example. They pay their Eskom amounts to that municipality, but that municipality does not pay that over to Eskom. They use it for salaries and functions and lavish lifestyles or whatever the case might be. I think we really need to ask National Treasury to look into ring fencing amounts so that we force municipalities to pay what they are getting. In other words, if you get paid for electricity, paid over for the supplier, so that we make sure that we assist these municipalities to really get on the right track when it comes to doing good governance in the municipalities. I agree with the Honorable Peters with regards to education. Yeah, it was me that mentioned the situation in John Taholo, but it is not only the Honorable Chairperson, it's really all over the country. We've got a growth in population, but we don't have a growth in our educational capabilities. And that is the one thing, well, one of many, but one of the most important things that will really bite us in the future in this country. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Honorable Okamp. Mahorena. Madikgale.
Thobela malekae.
Rona le kae ma?
Re gona, ke a leboga. Let me take this opportunity and greet my co-chairpersons. I have managed to put my video on, but I can't see myself. I don't know whether the chairperson is able to see me.
We can see you clearly, ma'am.
Okay, thank you
And
very
hear
much.
you.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. I was greeting my two co-chairs, the honorable members of this committee, and the department, and also to thank the department for the responses. with regard to Sasria, I have heard that the department said there was no need for the government to provide funding to the entity because the entity was sustainable. And when they were checking their balance sheet, the balance sheet was strong. So now, honorable members touched on the issue of the disasters that is happening. And that should at least make the department to make sure that they change their way of assisting Sasria. Because if they check their a sheet and find that the sheet is wrong, then when this disaster happen, then it's a problem. And maybe I should give an example of our ladies who sit every month, chairperson, under the trees and on the stones every month, whereby they will come together and make sure that their club is sustainable, even if there's no death or there's nothing. So that's my request to the department, that they shouldn't look on the strong balance sheet, but they should come up with something whereby they take care of the pairs of the people that will assist our people during a disaster. The other honorable member touched on the issue of SNDF, that we did not hear anything about it. Chairperson, I have a request. In my language, we are saying Sekare, Sepi Wakachachila Lesulo. So when the Department of Defense Intelligence always comes to the Committee of JCI, when they give their reports, you would feel that this department is really suffering. And sometimes they will even complain about National Treasury that they don't give them the money, or they don't assist them with the money. So my request, Memam Pokore, please make sure that this department is being taken care of with the money that they deserve. They are the face of our country and they are taking care of us. And on the issue of monitoring, this issue of the department, that every time they are being given allocation and at the end of the day, they did not manage to use what they were allocated for, and then it goes back to National Treasury. It is also worrisome. Maybe if we can, all of us as committees and National Treasury and whoever is responsible for monitoring, we make sure that this department use the money that they are allocated for, or else we take all that they did not use and give it to SANDF. Thank you very much, Chair.
Ra leboga Magorena. Before I request the co-chairperson to talk, Principal, I think you will understand the excitement that we want to give you everything that we can think at the moment, because we hardly get that opportunity as the committee, but we know as the ANC, we do have that opportunity to can engage you. But as a committee now, I think it might have maybe skipped me, but I haven't heard anything, and maybe it's irrelevant. In the issue of water, DM, the issue of water is very severe, and it looks like we are being painted with the same paint with the other political parties that have not the same ideology that we have, the same focus that we have, and the same plans and vision that we have. We know that we have committed to be biased to the poor, to change the lives of the people, to improve the lives of the people. But you talk about the issue of I'll talk about my constituency, Dr. J.S. Moroka and Tembisile Hani municipality, where I stay and where I come from in J.S. Moroka. This issue of water is very, very, very serious. And it's something that has been going on for years. And one is not surprised that today we are having by-elections in Ward 10 and J.S. Moroka. And some of these organizations, they are not contesting, because you see people are on the streets waiting for the water tank to come and give them water. And you ask yourself, when you engage others, you go to their houses to visit, those services are not there when there are no activities. And I think even in the imbizo of the president, it was there. So these are basic issues. I'm not saying other things that were prioritized, seeming to prioritize, are not important, but water is a basic right. They have the basic right to have. It's something that is enshrined in the Constitution. And we go for a week or weeks without water. And this is the kind of life that we have been living. And there are people who cannot afford to have boreholes. There are people who cannot afford to buy JoJo's. So I'm just saying to you, Principal, as the political head in Treasury, please assist us, and because we don't want to be seen as people who are not listening. We went there to 2019, 2014, all the elections, the same thing. And others didn't even care, even though they say they care about the poor. They are not even contesting elections there. There are only two parties. So I will request Honorable Co-Chairperson Ushenge to talk to the responses, to comment if he has something to say. Babsheng.
Thank you, Honorable Chair Mahlangu, and good morning to DM Masondo and Dr. Mampo and the Treasury team. Thank you very much for the responses. As we always say, for those issues which were not responded to, Dr. Mampo, you know what to do. Please make sure that you bring them back in, or you write the responses down so that the members can at least know that their issues have been attended to. But thank you very much for the comprehensive report in general. Perhaps before I come to my issues, I think it's opportune at this time to congratulate government and welcome the extension of the intervention of government on the fuel prices. There's no doubt that it would be a big relief, not just to business, but to the ordinary consumers. Although it happened at the last minute, but the fact of the matter is that today is the first Wednesday of the month. We know that the type of relief that government has given the people of South Africa as far as the fuel is concerned. And let's also accept that this is due to the external shocks to the economy. Many things are happening at the moment. And in most cases, we are a price taker when it comes to that. The 4 billion rand unspent in health, as far as the PPEs were concerned, there's something called environments, Dr. Mampo and the team. So rather than having the money which is being unspent when there are other pressures and there's a process of doing that, why was that not done? Rather than having the department coming back saying, no, we don't have enough money, there are cuts, and we know for a fact that there are many challenges in the sector. So there's a good reason why this money, in fact, it was savings. It was savings. And then what do we do with savings? Don't we push them to areas which need funding? In DM, Honorable Peter spoke about our oversight to the Department of Defense. One thing which came out very loud there was a question of the Department of Defense saying that they would like to own their their buildings, their offices, and everything as far as accommodation is concerned, not just own, but also build their own things. I just want to get what is the view of National Treasury and the executive in general on this one. For us, when we've got a crisis, for instance, if you remember the Val Dam crisis, the Val River crisis, we say the defense should go there, but when they must build their own things and be responsible for their own accommodation, we want other departments to be responsible for that. There are a lot of savings and efficiencies which they spoke to, and as far as we are concerned, and many other departments, as far as we are concerned, we think that that should be a priority and allow them to do that, but not just allow them. Let's look at other departments. The monies that they shared with us as far in terms of savings that would come out of that, I think this is something that needs your urgent attention as the executive. From our side, when we present our report to National Assembly, we are going to be recommending that, but we're just saying that since there was a process which had started, but we seem to be taking too long. It talks about our unemployment challenges that we are having. And if you look, for instance, at the presidential unemployment intervention, one thing that I would like to throw to you, DM, and your team, you don't need to give us answers now, is that before the SOEs were used as training grounds for many things. Where, for instance, you can even budget certain money or some money from the sitters, where sometimes people are being trained for nothing, and they train, their training gets completed, they get certificates, but nobody absorb them from the market. So I'm just saying, is it something that you'd look at, for instance, that the monies that we put for training, that we also have the SOEs and say for a particular program where these young people go to these companies, they are paid, their payment is ring-fenced, and we know that for instance, you have got engineers who don't have opportunity to do engineering work because the companies, and especially the SOEs, can't absorb them in their budgets. Why don't we look at that possibility of getting meaningful skilling of these young people using SOEs, try to ring fence money. There's some money from CETA, if you care to know, and some grants that we ring fence them, we put them into these companies, and they get meaningful skills. There's no type of engineering you don't get at Transnet. There's no type of engineering that you don't get at ESCOM, at BRASA. But again, even when it comes to the financial, to the accounting things, even if it comes to HR, there are all those departments. As long as we ring fence them and we pay, for instance, even if we say for 2 years, we are putting these young people, they get real experience, and we pay them, or they are the funding is ring fenced one way or the other. Lastly, Chairperson, I heard the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal saying, despite despite commitments and pronouncements about a national government's intervention in the floods in KZN. I think I'm correct. If I heard him wrongly, I would admit, but I think that's what I heard. He was saying that they haven't received any money from national government. Is that true? And what is happening? What is the latest? Can you please share with us? Thank you very much, Comrade Chair. Those would be my my inputs.
Sabonga Shenge. I'll allow Dr. Mampo Modise to give the responses or comment on your inputs, all of the members, and then the minister, the DM or principal. Dr. Mampo.
Thank you, Chairperson. Can I ask Ulrika to start with the disaster stuff, and then Brandani to talk on the SANDF?
Please do. The reason I'm not allowing everybody else who have spoken to speak is that we don't have the luxury of time now, but it's fine. You can do that. And then the DM will be the last after your responses.
Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So on the disasters, let me start with Honorable Du Toit's questions about the capacity to avail funds. I suppose the question really is whether there's capacity to spend the funds. So whilst 25 billion Rand is the number that's been thrown around as the cost of repair, in some cases, for some municipalities, this would be 3 or 4 times their annual capital budget. So the ability to spend a large sums of money within a given financial year is really what is being considered at the moment. So the focus is really on the immediate relief and bringing, and I'm using the word in the broadest term possible, in relation to the disaster response that would allow for, that would return services to some level of functionality within a given financial year. So there isn't an expectation that 25 billion Rand will be needed within one financial year. I'm not, based on some of the numbers that we have seen, we're not even sure if they'll be able to do this with, or provinces and municipalities will be able to spend this within 2 financial years. So just in relation to, and I'll stay on the disasters, to what Honorable Okamp has raised around the declarations and droughts. So the immediate relief grants that we have in the budget that was considered in the Division of Revenue Bill by both these committees recently has 4 conditional grants that totals R1 billion. 2 of those conditional grants, one to province and to municipalities on the cooperative governance budget, deals with immediate relief on the basis of it's not even a declared disaster. We've given greater flexibility. So you don't even have to declare the disaster anymore. The disaster just needs to be classified. And that funding for that disaster should be spent within 6 months of the funds being transferred. The other 2 immediate relief grants that we have also to provinces and municipalities is on the human settlements budget. And that only requires some declaration of an agreement that a housing emergency exists. So in the cases of provinces, between the MEC and the National Department, and the Mayor and the National Department in the case of municipalities. So those grants, those 4 grants makes up the R1 billion that we say is available for immediate relief. In relation to drought, and maybe this is a gap that we have within the disaster management system, because unlike other disasters that is triggered by an event, a drought is a prolonged continuum, and the way disasters are declared means that it needs to be renewed all the time, and we never know how long a drought lasts. So some adjustments probably needs to be made in consideration in how we consider droughts relative to one-off events like a fire or a flood. Then just on, and I don't know if I've responded to Honorable Butalezi's question or the statement that was made by the Premier that they haven't seen money from national government. The Disaster Management Framework and the Disaster Management Act is quite clear on the roles and responsibilities in relation to managing disasters and where money comes from in the first instance. Section 57 of the Disaster Management Act is quite clear that before national government supports or assists through funding, the Minister of Cooperative Governance may ask or set some guidelines around what needs to be done to ensure that money is then spent properly, and can consider things like, was it reasonable to assume that some mitigation measures needed to be in place? What were those mitigation measures? And given the magnitude and severity of the disaster, what funds did province and municipalities put in before national government comes in? So on the one hand, the 1 billion rand from those 4 conditional grants, those funds have been requested from the province and from municipalities. But we have also done a whole range of other things. For example, in the Department of Human Settlements, we've brought forward some of the transfers on the Human Settlements Development Grant. That meant that 733 million rand was transferred to the province earlier than what was expected for them to respond to the disaster. Similarly, funds were also reprioritized, for example, in the water budget to provide for water tankering services. So whilst money might not be within the direct control of the provinces, support from national government through various programs has been provided. Just in relation to Honorable Dutoit's question around the SANDF and the bridge building, the responsibility for the bridge building is where those roads belong to provinces. The province takes the responsibility around all of that. And our understanding is that the Provincial Roads Department has confirmed to the Department of Public Works that they do have the 243 million rand for the, I think it's 23 bridges that needs to be rebuilt. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Who's next?
Thanks, Honorable Member. It's Rendani here. I will deal with the questions on defense. Starting with the question regarding the funding request for defense. You will remember, honorable members, in our engagement when we're discussing the appropriation bill, I made the statement that additional funding in defense is necessary, but not sufficient. There are certain things that also defense must do. And the biggest challenge lies with compensation of employees. This budget allocates 1.8 billion to deal with the rejuvenation of the SANDF. In the previous financial year, the 2021-22, defense set aside deliberately almost 3 billion to move that money to compensation of employees. So it's irregular, but they are dealing with the challenge that has been with us since 2018 regarding management of personnel numbers. So when we hear challenges like the military cannot purchase uniform, the boats and stuff like that, it is mainly because of the decision that they've taken to set aside instead of dealing directly with the challenge of compensation employees. So these are some of the things that defense itself must do, because that the opportunity cost of that 3 billion are those things that they didn't do, like buying a uniform. That's the first point. Then on the issue of devolution of function from public works to defense, Honorable Chair, we fully support this decision. It's a decision which was taken in 2018 by this committee. We fully support it, but there are challenges with public works. It appears that they don't want to relinquish the power But now with the time, defense just discovered that actually that function in law, it is with them. There's nothing in black and white that gives public works powers to run the facilities. So, and as a result, they are saying that the function was basically outsourced. So it is in the hands of defense to continue with this function with an agreement with public works. So yes, it doesn't make sense for defense to build bridges in KZN or wherever, whereas they themselves, they can't even paint their own walls. But in short, Chairperson, we fully support that decision that defense can run their own facilities. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rendani. Mahore na setla se ke sa kgale hore ke sa bjale.
Ke sa kgale mama ya apology ape Chairperson wa rena ke re mishedi ya tabele re nke ta se phumula.
Se furotle. The Deputy Minister, can I hand over to you now? I hope the Minister is still on the platform.
I am Chairperson.
Thank you.
Yes, so thanks so much for the comments and questions. And we will always avail ourselves to come and account to the people, as I initially said. Some were questions, some were comments, and some of the questions, as Honorable Butele is advised, that we will have to come back to them in writing. So on the question raised by Honorable Raider, which was, what is the impact on the reduction of fuel levy, which were announced yesterday? Honorable members will recall that we said that we'll reduce the fuel levy by 150 in June, that is this month, and 75 cents in July. And I must indicate that if we did not undertake this measure, the fuel price will probably increase by 4 rands. And for the reasons that honorable members have said, this was going to affect ordinary people, businesses in a big way. Not that it is not already, because the fuel price now, it's still not at the price at which the economy can afford, but this is a measure that we've undertaken to mitigate the worst that we could have seen if we did not undertake this policy measure, which was to reduce the fuel levy in terms of the numbers that I've just mentioned. And we know that part of the reason why the petrol price it's increasing is because of the situation, as we said, in Ukraine, which is increasing the oil price, which is going up. And I think our exchange rate, our currency has also depreciated, which makes it more expensive for us to import. So anything that we import out of South Africa, it's more expensive because the value of our currency has depreciated. So that makes it difficult for us to basically import, and including oil, and that create problems for us insofar as the fuel price is concerned. So, but out of that recognition, we said, as government, we need to do something for that. And I think Honorable Raider's question is, what will be the impact of this on the fiscus? Our estimation is that we'll lose 4.5 billion from the fuel levy revenue. as to what is it that we need to do to mitigate this. I think we'll continue to assess the situation and present options in October this year during the MTBPS and announce appropriate measures to ensure that the fiscal framework that we presented in 2022 Feb is still intact. And I think it's also at that point that we will have looked at different options, some of the options that Honorable Okap has just spoken about. So the conversation in that regard will continue. So that's my comment insofar as the question raised by Honorable Raider. The point raised, which is a correct observation by Honorable Peters, which is that any poor performance in any sphere of government and department entities is a reflection of the entire government. And I think implicit in that argument, she was making the point that because we do have control of, to use the formulation, and I'm not sure if I'm quoting you verbatim correctly, that because we control the purse, therefore we should have some leverage in enforcing good governance. And I think in certain instances where the law allows, we have done exactly that. We've withheld cash transfer to a number of municipalities. As you remember, for instance, Nelson Mandela was just one example in that regard. But these are largely reactive measures. From the being proactive, yes, we do set the minimum standards according to which accounting or senior officials, CFOs, MMM need to be appointed, and we do that as government as a whole. But when there's some of these failures, in certain instances, we do come at the end as National Treasury, precisely because some of the things we don't have entire control over. For instance, the appointment of an MM is a municipal function. We can set the standards and say the person who gets appointed to be CFO's MM, municipal manager, should meet the following. Those are minimum standards. You need more than that. And it's up to the councils that also determine who they basically appoint. I mean, part of the standoff, which is causing problems in Nelson Mandela Metro, as an example, is the fact that you do have two municipal, or it is alleged that there's two municipal managers, and we're looking at that situation as National Treasurer, and we said we may have to consider withholding, because that's the leverage that we have, that we cannot continue to transfer the taxpayers' money into such entities when we can see that there's misgovernance, there's challenges in the way in which some of these local municipalities are run. But at the end of the day, these councils, these spheres of government, they do have original powers, and they've got to do the right thing. We do have limits on the extent to which we can go as National Treasury, but it's important that all spheres of government, they do need to do what they have to do. For instance, if you appoint a municipal manager, a CFO who can't do the job, we're not involved in terms of interviews ourselves as National Treasury. Yes, we can set the standards, we can set the requirements, but the outcome of those interviews is largely a function of what the municipal council basically decide. We see the results when we require performance that, no, look here, those who had powers to make certain decisions, they made a wrong decision, and the best way of correcting this is that we're not going to transfer funds, and we're not always punitive. We do have capacity building programs to support municipalities and all that. So there's a number of programs that we have in working with the municipalities. So we don't always like sit there and say, no, let's wait until they fail. And once they fail, that's when we intervene. We do have a number of programs in this regard. And these programs have been going on for years. They've yielded good results in municipalities that we've worked with. And at the end of the day, in our view, is political leadership that must really take ultimate responsibility insofar as these issues are concerned. But I think the comment is well welcome. And if there's other measures that the honorable members think we should undertake, we're more than willing to look at that because there's a lot of suggestions and policy proposals that have come from this House, which have also sharpened us and helped us also to deal with certain blind spots that we may have, as National Treasury, but as government as a whole. Honorable Dikgale, there's a point she raised about the need for us to provide enough support, financial support to defense. And the accusation is that it's us as National Treasury who are not providing this money. Like I said at the beginning, we present a budget preceded by priorities set by government, which are always well articulated by the president. We've got the MINCOM BUD, which is a committee of ministers who look at this budget, recommend to cabinet, and eventually it comes to Parliament. So it's not us who make these decisions. It's the totality of the whole, particularly the two arms of state, which is government as well as the legislative one. So eventually it's a parliamentary decision. It cannot be that it's us as National Treasury who are accused that we're cutting budgets and all that. We do our own assessments and say, this is what is available in the fiscal envelope. These are limited resources that we have, and let's take decisions on how we basically allocate them. And the limited resources are informed by a number of things. The economy is not growing. We don't have good material basis for us to generate enough revenue to fund all our expenditures, and therefore we've got to make certain priorities. And unfortunately, some of the expenditure items may suffer precisely because of the fiscal constraint or the fiscal envelope that we basically have. I think the last point raised by yourself, Chair, on water, I fully agree with you that water is a big issue that we should work on, and part of Operation Vulindlela it's looking at this matter. And all I want to say is that money is not a problem, because if money was a problem, the municipalities and water authorities will be spending very well on the conditional grants that we provide, but you still have under expenditure on those grants that we do provide. So, and there's poor investment on water infrastructure by a number of municipalities. And because there's poor investment in water infrastructure, you also have this problem, which is usually called the non-revenue water, leakages, water is being lost, and so forth and so forth. So the decisions that are taken in local municipalities, I think is one thing that we should also carefully look at, because I mean, some of these municipalities, they will employ a lot of people, not in technical services, building the capacity for us to run proper water services, maintaining the infrastructure, taking care of the assets that are responsible for water. We employ more people, for instance, in political office. I mean, Mangaung, as an example, has 200 staff members in the office of the mayor, speaker, chief whip, and MMC. And yet they can't pay Bloomhoff. So it's some of these things that we really need to be paid closer attention to and be granular in analyzing them and dealing with them. And of course, the team that we've put together to look at that metro is beginning to question these issues and deal with some of the problems that are generating service delivery problems for our people. And I think, and then in addition to that, we are also looking at National Treasury, looking at these grants on how we make them more effective to make sure that we improve insofar as the performance of expenditure and allocation insofar as these assets are concerned, including the asset management of our water infrastructure. And I think where you are also absolutely right and making a very valid point is the water and rural areas. Because in some of these areas, you don't even have water infrastructure. The borehole intervention is one thing, but also there's some corruption that is also taking place in which if you are to procure the service for water, the borehole as a private person, the price will be different from the price that is being paid by the municipality. And we are beginning to get into that and then say, but it doesn't make sense. The pricing for some of this infrastructure that you are rolling out as different spheres of government, it doesn't really make sense. So National Treasury, we're getting into those areas. I mean, the president day, when he was in, I think it was in Limpopo, he discovered, and I think we should have discovered it ourselves before he could discover it himself, that I think 1 kilometer road was costing 12 million. I could be wrong about the figure. But it is some of those issues that we really need to, as we even roll out infrastructure, water infrastructure in those rural areas, it's things that we really need to seriously rein in. We can't throw our hands in the air and do nothing about these issues. So I think as and when you hold us accountable around those issues, you help us also to act decisively on those issues that you've basically raised. But I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you and also to get your insights into those issues. And I think as and when we do our work as government as a whole, we'll always seek to continuously improve on our performance. Thank you very much, Chair and your co-chair and honorable members. And I also want to thank the National Treasury team. They always try to do their best in giving technical form to the political decisions that we take. In other words, crunching numbers and making sure that we do everything according to the law, according to our policies. So I really want to thank them for having enabled us as the representative of our people to have fruitful discussions and take certain decisions today. Thank you, Chair. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Honorable DM, my principal, and thanks for the response. I think we have done justice to the work that is before us today. And I want to appreciate the commitment of the team treasurer. Dr. Mampo, as you say, they are always here to give us clarity on issues that we need clarity on. And while you are still on the screen, I've pinned you I hope everybody can pin you and pin yourself.
Okay.
And hopefully what I'm going to say is not, I'm not the first one to say it. I think you have been told that you look like one of our ancestors in the movement. You really do look like, and I confirmed with a co-chairperson, how do you see it?
Ancestor.
Yeah.
The ancestor is resurrected in me, probably.
Yeah, he has resurrected. Shenge, who does he look like? Honorable Buthelezi, you really look like OR. I think many comrades here, they will agree. Yes, he does. You look
No,
like
it's because of the hair, Chair.
yes, the hair and the glasses, so you must keep them.
Okay, no, I will.
Thank you very much. Chairperson Buthelezi, can you please say your last words and take us towards the closure? Thank you very much, DM.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I think you have covered me in everything. I fully support what you said. I think before we end the meeting, can I just check from Lubabalo? Lubabalo, do you have any announcement? Okay.
Hello, Chairperson.
Yes.
No, Chairperson. We don't have any announcement to make. We'll communicate with members.
Okay. Thank you. Darren, do you have any announcement?
Chairperson, yes. After the commencement of the presentation, I received 2 further apologies from Mr. Kwankwa and Ms. Mplangweni. And then I just want to remind the Standing Committee on Appropriations that we've still got another meeting at 2 o'clock, also with the National Treasury. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Let me take this opportunity to thank everybody who's on the platform, in particular my co-chairperson, Honorable Mahlangu, and honorable members from the Select Committee on Appropriations. I think we're doing what Saika raised, that it's very important that we should not be operating in silos ourselves. I'm sure we can still do more. Thank you again, DM, National Treasury team. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Shenge. Thank you, honorable members, support staff, comrades and members, DM. Thank you so much. Keep well.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, DM Lekai.
Where is the lunch, Chairpersons?
Baka go Limpopo. Are you go Limpopo?
Eh, ke gae.
Le gae, utlwa le ya tsena this weekend.
Re ya tsena ene go tonya reg. Ke delegate.
Re tla bolela ka phone.
Ke delegate.
Good luck.
But I defer vodka.
Re leboga.
All right, bye-bye.